Hello, I'm Stan Stalnaker with Hub Culture, and we're at the World Climate Summit in Durban, South Africa, against the backdrop of COP17. I'm here with Russel Mills, who's the Global Director for Energy and Climate Policy at Dow. Now, Dow is a company that is very large and very, very involved in many areas of what we call the value chain for literally the economy. It's great to see you guys at COP and to see some activity from the company in the sphere of climate change. So tell us what you guys are doing here and what the focus is for you.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be here.
Yeah.
The chemical industry is known to be a very big user of resources and energy. What's probably not known is we're also a very big solution provider. And so one of the reasons we're here is to try and explain that a little better. To give you an example, about 95% of all manufactured products are somehow touched by chemistry. So you can imagine in a world where we are seeing growing consumption, how important it is to also tackle that value chain. Let me give you a couple of examples just to put the numbers in perspective. Dow produces a very well-known product called styrofoam, and when you are manufacturing that, if it takes 1 unit of CO2 emissions to produce it, during its lifetime use, because when you put it into a building it's used for an awful long time, it will save about 200 times that much. So there's huge leverage there. So as both a company and as an industry, we're trying to get the message across that we recognize we have a responsibility as an industry to produce these products as efficiently as possible, but also in a world where there is limited money and limited resources, because of the leverage factor, it's very, very important that we also find ways of improving these kinds of insulation products.
So a little goes a long way.
Exactly.
Right.
And there's many more examples. The other point I would make is the numbers tend to be huge. So we did work as the global chemical industry of looking at the life cycle carbon impact of all our products globally. And what we discovered is that if you take insulation, just to stay on the insulation, now we're talking total insulation, that the greenhouse gas savings from the total insulation used from our high performance products is 2,400 million tons. Now that's more than half the total emissions of the European Union. So you begin to get an idea of the scale here.
The scale is huge.
And the same applies when you look at things like light bulbs, packaging, detergent use, because if you can reduce the temperature at which we all wash our clothes, and we all want to wash our clothes, you can save also about 100 million tons. And the important point we're trying to get across is that in, for example, the developed world, about 2/3 of total emissions come from the consumption phase, from the houses we live in and the cars we drive. So if we can make the cars a little bit lighter, there's another 100 million tons we can save. When you add all this up, that obviously turns into a huge number.
And so we were talking a little bit earlier, and you said that one of the big concerns, not only for people in the sort of climate world, but for companies that are really more in the industrial world, is that there's this increasing rate of emissions, like per consumer. So the average person today is probably emitting higher emissions than they were 5 years ago, and certainly more than 10 years ago. And you guys are looking at ways to try and change that trajectory and change that trend. What are you doing to do that?
Exactly. Our belief is it's very, very difficult to tell a consumer, stop driving your car or stop living in a bigger house.
Yeah, who wants to do that?
Or if someone has a beautiful old house, to tell them you've got to knock it down and start all over again. So the kind of thing we're doing, for example, is we have a technology now which enables the insulation product to be half as big as it was before. And then when you're renovating in the inside of a house where space is of a huge premium, you can do it because to get a real energy efficient house, you may need this amount of insulation, and that obviously is not something you do when you're renovating a property. The same would be true on things like high efficiency light bulbs, and I'm sure you've been through this discussion before. People are living in bigger houses, but with the latest technology, and we're a component. We're not trying to claim the credit for everything here. We're one of the components to enable this to happen. We consider ourselves.
But you're also very far upstream. So the one change here actually could have a multitude of effects downstream.
Exactly.
To a final product.
Exactly right. And a lot of what we're trying to do is move to a what we call a more sustainable energy future. And this obviously involves not only making the existing technology we have more efficient, but also investing in new technologies. So we have new heat transfer products that are used in concentrated solar power. We are looking at a building integrated photovoltaic system in order to try and get the total cost of photovoltaics down. So when you put this product on your roof, it performs a multiple function. It acts as a roof tile or a slate in addition to providing photovoltaic power. We're trying to make wind turbines. Sorry?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool because
so your roof tile is a solar panel.
Exactly, and
Brilliant.
and that way you can have a competent builder can put it on your roof. You don't have to hire someone to put a separate solar panel up. So
is that how that I find that really cool.
Yeah.
Because you think of especially in America, obviously hundreds of millions of roofs out there.
Absolutely.
And on any given day or any given season, some of those roofs are being replaced. And
Exactly.
Like, how far away is that from the market? And is it a lot more expensive or a little? Obviously, it's a panel, so it's not
Right.
gonna be cheap.
The idea is when you look at the total cost. So installing the roof, paying for a qualified roofer, having a tile, and so on. The intention is for the total cost to be lower, and it's just been launched in Colorado. So we're very excited about it. There's obviously a lot more information about this on our website, stow.com. But yeah, it's a real innovation. It's an important breakthrough. It's at the moment being designed specifically for those markets, but we are also working on how do we expand that to other parts of the world. The other thing you have to do is when you are looking at renewables like wind or solar, you've also got to work on how do you create power when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're doing a lot of work on lithium-ion batteries, because you need to have a much more efficient storage system and a more affordable storage system. So that is an area of huge research for us.
So you make hay while the sun shines, and then...
Pretty much, and if you think about it, if you are trying to simplify an electric vehicle, it's really like having a whole stack of batteries which you have in your PC, and you sort of stack them up and put them in the back of your vehicle. Now, that's a very simplistic way of explaining it, but the aim is, how do you make those batteries lighter? Mm-hmm. And so lightweighting polymers is an area where we have a lot of expertise. How do you make the recharging faster, which is, how do you speed up that chemical reaction, but how do you do it so you don't generate a lot of heat? So we're getting into a situation where people are basically going to be putting little chemical plants in the back of their cars, but they will be safe, fast, light, rechargeable many times. And this is really the interface of chemical engineering plus the automotive industry coming together to make that a reality longer term.
So I understand that the fastest growing division within Dow is actually based around bio and you could almost call it new chemical processes. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then we'll wrap up. But I'm curious to hear, I think one of the things that when people think about the chemical industry,
Right.
they think about chemicals. And chemicals, by and large, don't jive so well with biological systems in terms of our impressions. So what is Dow doing, and is there hope, is there progress happening in this space?
There's a lot of progress, but you also have to bear in mind this is a very long-term process. It takes about 30 years for a new energy technology to gain 1% share globally. So it's a long-term process, but that means even more important to start now.
Yeah.
And yes, we are, for example, involved in a bioethanol project in Brazil with our joint venture partners Mitsui over there. And here you're taking the sugarcane, you're fermenting that, you're turning that into bioethanol, and the bioethanol is then turned into ethylene, which is turned into polyethylene, which then becomes a renewable-based plastic, which are used by all kinds of
So
people.
bioplastics.
Yeah. But I think the important thing to bear in mind here is that this is one example amongst many, and it's going to be a long time before all parts of the world are going to be relying on bioplastics. So you have to also make your other plastics as environmentally efficient as possible.
And do you see leapfrog, or are there changes coming that are going to speed up this? transition?
I think the areas we were talking about, like the building integrated photovoltaics, the bioethanol to make renewable resource-based plastic, the innovations in battery technology, those are breakthroughs. And those will have huge changes and huge impacts. But in the meantime, just this continuous improvement in energy efficiency, resource efficiency, water efficiency is something we need to do year by year, and that's very much what we are
And I think
on.
that the general consensus is that energy efficiency is the fastest way to the biggest scale changes.
Yeah,
right? I mean, if
absolutely.
you're China or wherever, the biggest, fastest, cheapest thing we can do right now is retrofits and efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for the next 2 decades, I think most of our resource savings, most of our CO2 savings will come from some form of efficiency. And that's an area where we're intricately involved in. But in terms of the new business growth, and we think we have something like a $5 billion business today involved in cleaner energy, less greenhouse gas, purer water, those kind of areas. We think that will be a $15 billion business 10 years from now. So it's a huge growth area.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. We mustn't lose sight of the need to drive efficiency while we're working on some of these more breakthrough innovations.
Yeah, so it's all about efficiency and it's all about breakthroughs over at Dow. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Stan Stalnaker at the World Climate Summit for Hub Culture. And again, this is Russell Mills from Dow. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great.